Now, the count has taken a long time. The election was more than a week ago, and at last check, the margin in Kooyong was just about 1,100 votes. But Dr. Monique Ryan has been returned as the independent member for Kooyong. Good morning.
Good morning, Richard. How are you?
Good. It's been I'm guessing, a long week for you.
Yes, it is a long time to be waiting, and I think a long week for the many wonderful people at the AEC who've been counting since the election night and who are still counting today. There's still a number of contests undecided around the country. It's a lot of work for them over a long period of time.
Does it take too long?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we need to have certainty about the process, particularly in those electorates where the results are really, really close. We don't want people questioning it. We want people to have a knowledge that every vote is counted, I believe, 3 times, and it's scrutinised by the AEC and by people on each side, and that we can believe the results. So it's important that we have that certainty.
Was there a moment you thought, I'm actually going to lose this thing? Was there
Last Friday I went to the footy and I got a message from my team to say, we've had a couple of batches come in that aren't looking that good, and I just sat there and I must admit I didn't particularly enjoy the game last week, even though we got the win. But overall, it seemed like things were okay. But it was interesting because what happened, it was on the night the Age and ABC called it early, and just didn't realise that there'd been a much higher number of postal votes than usual, and that probably just reflects some changes in the demographics of the electorate, and that probably put us off a bit.
The seat really captured a lot of attention during this campaign, and a lot seemed to be going on. There seemed to be a nasty vibe to it. Your husband was moving a sign, the spinal surgeon stealing signs and making some pretty derogatory comments. Why was Kooyong so nasty?
Well, I do think that the Liberal Party really wanted it back. They spent an enormous amount of money on advertising in the electorate in the last 6 months, and the advertising was pretty negative. There were also a number of third-party groups like Australians for Prosperity, which is a third-party group funded by the coal and gas lobby, Advance, and some other right-wing groups were putting a huge amount of effort into getting Kooyong back for the Conservative side of politics. And, it did get pretty willing. Because I have to say, I had 2,000 volunteers out there. We were trying to basically convince the electorate that it was worthwhile sticking with independent representation. So there are a lot of people there. Then when we got to the pre-polls and the polling booths, the Liberal Party brought in dozens of exclusive Brethren conscripts and the massive amounts of signage at both of the pre-poll booths. It felt, and then a whole lot of third-party groups also getting in people's faces at the pre-poll and at polling booths. It was pretty challenging, and I think many people. It was similar in many electorates around Australia. There were many people telling me that things were much more tense and much more difficult than they have been in previous federal elections. And I think we probably need to look at how we run our elections so that we maintain it as a good and positive process for people to be involved in.
Did your side throw dirt too, though? Did your team do digging some dirt on your opponent, Amelia Hamer?
We had a situation where the Liberal candidate presented herself to the electorate as a millennial renter who was struggling to pay her rent and understood the difficulties of young people in Kooyong who are struggling to own a home of their own. In fact, how she represented herself was, I think, a bit disingenuous. In fact, it came to light that she owned a couple of homes and had significant personal wealth. There's nothing wrong with that, but she misrepresented herself to the electorate. That was all information that was in the public domain, but it wasn't information that was brought into the public domain by the media. It came into the public domain via social media, and there were people who were involved in my campaign who had identified some of that information and disseminated it to other people via the social media. But, it's information that the electorate deserve to have, I think. Yep. And there is a concern, I think, that I wonder, we saw in many electorates around the country, particularly with Liberal candidates, there's information coming to light in the last few weeks before the actual election that probably, if the media had done a deep dive on these candidates, would have come to light significantly earlier.
A message there, the media lift its game. I wanted to ask you, Melbourne's now a sea of red. You look at the map, there's Labor seats from everywhere, and it's the same across the country. The Prime Minister's got a huge majority. How do you as an independent stay relevant in that parliament?
Well, we have a parliament where the Liberals and the Nats are now engaged in, in fighting about their leadership, and where we don't have, neither the Liberal Party or the National Party had well-developed policies that they brought to the last federal election. Someone has to hold the government to account. I think we've seen in Victoria at a state level what happens when you don't have an effective opposition. It's not good for democracy. And so my job as an independent is to hold the government to account, to act on the things that Kooyong and other electorates care about, whether that be housing affordability, whether it be climate, whether it be tax reform.
Do you have a relationship with the Prime Minister? Is that something you can work with him on? Because, his enemy is the Liberal Party and so is yours. Could you work together?
Oh, look, I think I've worked constructively with people from across the House in the first 3 years that I was in Parliament, and I've effected change on those. A good example of that was the campaign that I ran 18 months ago for HEX reform, where we convinced their government that it was in their best interest to act on something that electorates like Kooyong really cared about. I did the same with a campaign to decrease the cost of medications, which Mark Butler adopted. And so it's a question of coming to the government with well-developed policy, which is in everyone's best interests, and convincing the government that they should act on that. And I think that's something I'll continue to do.
What's your priorities?
Well, I do care about climate. It's still front and central, and people, are concerned about the cost of electricity and gas. Well, they're affected by climate. People are concerned about the cost of groceries and the extent to which insurances have increased in recent years. They're all affected by climate. They're still front and centre for this country, and the transition to a net zero economy and the benefits of that should be front of mind for the government, and I'll be pushing them on that.
Do you think they're serious? Do you think the Prime Minister's serious about that?
The Prime Minister is serious about that, but the government still continues, the Labor Party still continues to receive backing from lobby groups who are not, who do not want it to act effectively and quickly on climate change. The major parties still continue to receive funding from coal and gas, and so they are, I think, a little bit betwixt and between. And so people like myself who feel really strongly about the need for quick, effective and judicious action on climate change have to continue to push them on that in the same way that we do on other issues that matter to communities like ours, like gambling reform, which both of the major parties have dropped the ball on in recent months.
Dr. Ryan, thanks so much for your time.